Hi there, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. Today, joining me by Zoom is Linda Joy Sullivan, who's the mayor of Newport, and Pam Ladds, who's a water warrior and activist. And she says water is life, and you can't argue with that. Welcome, ladies. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
Good. Nice to see you both.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So let's just take some moments to talk about who you are and a little bit about your background. Linda, you want to go first? Tell us about you. Or I'll fill in the blanks if you want.
No, I just had to click that unmute button so that you'd hear me and not my many pets. So as most people are aware, I was a former legislator for 6 years. I represented the Bennington-Rutland district. And then I served at that point in time. I started out on commerce and then went on to institutions, and I was appointed by the then speaker to be on judicial rules as well. And then Governor Scott appointed me as a commissioner to the Vermont State Housing Authority, commissioner on the Commission of Women, and also he appointed me as a member of one of the Vermont Transportation Advisory Council members. I also serve as the chair of the Northeast Kingdom International Airport Task Force, and I'm also on the board of Campaign for Vermont.
Yes, that's us. Very nice, and we're glad you are a part of us.
Thank you.
So switching to Pam, I asked you, I love this, I asked you how I should introduce you to our audience, and you said, and I'm going to quote, "I come from the waters are a scarcest resource on the planet, and without it, none of us will survive." Can't beat that saying either. So Pam, could you introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your passion for conservation?
Well, as you'll probably notice when you hear me talking, I'm not a local. So as one of those immigrants that somehow arrived in Vermont, but that was via Pennsylvania and New York, I combined all of my interests. I worked in healthcare and social work. So I come from a totally different background from Linda's, but the thread that ran through it was health regulation and water, because you can't have health without healthy water. So I've been a LIPA health activist and a LIPA water activist, but I grew up on an island where water was really important to us. And I was shocked when I first came to this country, which was in 1980, the casual approach to water. It was as though, it's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous. What's the problem? We're perfectly safe. I was watching people waste it and poison it without a care in the world. But in the last 40 years, that actually has begun to change, just not enough, not soon enough.
Well, and I think things have happened of late that have made people very much aware of that resource and how valuable it is. We live off a well, and that is, I'm always thinking about it. I'm always, because it could change in a heartbeat, right? You don't know what's happening upstream, and here we are. You get it checked maybe when you buy the house, but do you ever think to check more than that? Which I do. So.
Well, even if you do, it doesn't always matter. It can happen.
That's right. Oh, well, that's encouraging. Anyway, we're obviously talking about water, and we will also be talking about a couple of other things that deal with Newport later on tonight. But can we talk a little bit about Magog, just to sort of set the scene here? I don't know whether Pam or Linda, Pam, you may be the one to talk about what the lake is about. I love the explanation of Lake Memphremagog. Talk about where it is and what you'd like to share with us.
Do you want to go, Linda, or shall I? She's muted.
No, you can start, and then I'm sure there'll be one word that you'll leave out, and I'll fill it in.
Memphremagog means beautiful body of water. It's an Abenaki word. It's a glorious, gorgeous lake that stretches between northern Vermont and Magog in Quebec. It is about 27 miles between Newport and Magog, but we still have South Bay, which goes into Coventry, which somehow we tend to forget about. We forget that that's an extra 3 or 4 miles. And it's really important not to forget that, because that is what's
Yeah,
in contact with our landfill. But it's beautiful glacial water. When left to its own devices, it remains healthy, but it is surrounded with people all the way,
right.
all of whom contribute. 5 miles of it is in Newport, of the part going up to the Memphremagog part, 5 miles. So technically, we have a very large pond there, and the remaining 75% belongs to Canada, to Quebec.
Ah,
As our watershed is the watershed that feeds that lake. There are 4 rivers that run into it. They are what are bringing any contaminants into the lake.
interesting.
So we are the ones who are responsible for problems that migrate north. The lake, the Sherbrooke side, the Magog side, is a reservoir for the citizens of Sherbrooke, 175,000 of them.
Oh,
They drink from that lake. So anything we put in from our end risks their water supply.
right. Interesting. Linda, do you have any further comments on that?
I was just going to say that the water is used by services over 200,000 people for
Right.
drinking water, and we need to pay attention to that. And that's the most important issue right now, I think, is what we're really talking about.
So is there a group from Quebec and from Newport or this area or the state that work together to make sure that the lake stays pure and no
Yes
contaminants?
no. Yes and no.
Oh, go ahead.
There
Well,
are,
you go first. You go first. Go ahead.
okay. There's a lake conservation organization on the Quebec side called MCI, Memphremagog Conservation Incorporated. They do the bulk of the work. We have Memphremagog Watershed Association, which is a much smaller group. And then we have other activist groups that come into that. COVID didn't help us here, because while we were working with the other side, we were prevented from crossing the border for 2 years.
Right.
We are back crossing the border, but we couldn't even cross it up by water for a long time.
Huh.
Years.
But,
And as those of us who live on this side particularly cross regularly, that was a big deal, a big loss.
when my husband was stationed up there in Newport, they would go over all the time, and they'd make this circular motion with their hand that says just going over, shopping and coming back, and they'd be just let through, because after a while everybody got to know everybody.
Yes.
So yeah, that's cool. Anyway, so Linda, I was reading, and that's one of the reasons we're here. On February 24th, something happened. Do you want to set the stage for us on what happened on February 24th?
Sure. So there was definitely a malfunction over at the Kinsella treatment plant. And it led to release of, I believe, over 8,000 gallons, I think it was almost 9,000 gallons, I'll say 8,700 or something like that, gallons of the leachate. And of that, like 6,000 gallons were actually contaminated. There was in the paper that it was released, but it was contained. I actually did have an in-depth conversation with Director Matt Chapman at the state's Waste Management and Protection Division. And I went through the issues with the director, and he actually informed me that while some of the contaminant did slide out into the fourvey by the stormwater area, that it froze. And so it was easy to deal with and remove it. And they actually did hire an environmental consulting firm who's now been retained to go in there and assess the situation. And then I went through some of the permitting issues and problems, and I asked the director to explain what was actually going on with that. And he said there's actually 4 permits, that there were 3 from A&R and 1 from Act 250. And that The big issue is the Act 250 one, because there are appellate processes, because anybody can intervene. And so according to the director, they're waiting for that appeal process to stop, because the stormwater storage is being held right now in a tent, but there's actually a robust building that has been built that's heated to hold all of the contaminants. And because they don't have that permit, they cannot move it there yet.
Oh, wow.
And that will stop any of the leaks. And so they're in that quadre right now. And, Casella, technically they're outside of our jurisdiction of Newport, but as far as the Vermont and the world should be concerned, I mean, this is everyone's issue.
For sure.
And so it's not like, well, this is my turf or this is your turf. Everybody needs to get out there and protect this. But the biggest threat, this was the biggest threat was like Lake Champlain, was the phosphorus issues.
Right.
And I went over that with the director as well. He's been extremely accommodating. He's made sure that I am on his call list and that he's going to actually meet me, and we're going to go down there and look.
That's great. Well, good
Yeah,
that they're watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pam, I wanted to ask you, Linda mentioned a couple of things. If you could help us define.
Making my hair stand on end, actually, because.
Well, could you tell us a little bit what leachate is? Because
leachate
the
is
definition. I'm sorry, the definition was more confusing than the word.
It's the poisonous liquid that comes from rainwater and rotting garbage.
Oh.
And because a landfill is a great big hole.
Right.
And some of them have liners, some of them don't. But as the garbage rots there, this leachate, this liquid, bubbles up.
Lovely.
It's removed because it's poison, deadly poison. I mean, it has so many chemicals in that it's sort of beyond belief. It's not just PFAS chemicals, it's all of the other things. But there are so many other concerns about this, quote, pilot project treatment facility that those of us locally opposed every step of the way. The idea of having a treatment facility on the shores of Memphrey-Magog is absolute insanity. That is the last place on the planet it should ever be. And while it's so reassuring that the state says that 6,000 gallons of the 9,000 were treated and therefore okay, I have a bridge to sell you. I truly do not believe that, because they only test for a fraction of what we know is in there.
Right.
So it's just a totally unsafe principle. I don't care how beautifully heated the building is. That's irrelevant from where I sit. It's not a safe process in any way.
I was reading about, and I don't know how to pronounce it, it's the SAFF, S-A-F-F, leachate treatment. That's the new system, isn't it? What does that do differently than other waste places?
What it allegedly does is it pulls and I say allegedly deliberately, it allegedly pulls the chemicals from it that we're trying to remove, which are the forever chemicals. But this is not a system that gets rave reviews in other parts of the country. It's one of the cheaper systems, and I'm not convinced that being an expensive one makes any difference.
Right.
None of the systems are really very effective and efficient at this point. There are over 15,000 chemicals in this family. They're only testing for up to 20. That is all.
Wow. See, that's when we were talking about my well water, there are a million things you could test for, and I can't afford that. And they just have so many that they test for, and how do you know? You don't.
You don't. And what we know is the risks from those chemicals contaminating our lake, our drinking water, our food, our air, are way higher than that. I mean, the list of diseases unquestionably linked to them is massive.
Right.
The canaries in the coal mine here are some of our cats. Our cats are getting thyroid disease way higher than would, quote, normally be expected in the population. We know there's a connection between thyroid disease and PFAS chemicals. We know that. It's an endocrine disruptor. What are we doing to ourselves?
Do they test? Have they tested the well water of people around the area, and if the
Yeah.
if the leachate is seeped through? Have
Yes,
they tested?
there are definitely leaks from some of the cells at Casella. We know that.
Yeah.
We can prove that. ANR knows that. DEC knows that.
Wonderful.
They're fiddling around with under drains trying to prevent that. But it's going to be an ongoing risk. It was a crazy place to ever put a landfill. And I'm not arguing that there needs to be a landfill, but this is the only landfill in the state. When you put your garbage out wherever you live and it's picked up, it comes trucking its way up to us in those great big MBI juggernauts that you probably pass on the road.
Right.
They're trashing our roads, they're trashing our air.
I didn't realize that was the only one in Vermont. You must get a lot of garbage.
We certainly do, and that's a lot of money.
And no pun intended there, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's a lot of money for a private landfill, and it's a private business. And he's doing what businesses do, and I'm truly not knocking that, because that's what businesses do. But their responsibility is to their shareholders. It's not to us who live and breathe the air, drink the water, eat the veggies that are grown on the soil.
Well, and I know you're part of, and maybe not as active, and don't speak for them, but there is a group, which I love the name. It's called DUMP, and it's Don't Undermine Memphremagog's Purity.
Correct.
And they've been very vocal, correct?
Rightly so, yes.
Yeah. And they must have, in placing the landfill there, I'm sure the mayor of Newport, that office, and others must have weighed in. Nobody was home listening, or what happened?
Well, you can't blame Linda. She wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said the mayor of Newport.
But you can certainly hold the previous one responsible in some ways, and certainly the previous city manager, who at that time were allowing Casella Waste to discharge thousands and thousands of gallons of leachate, to run it through our city system that couldn't possibly treat it and discharge it into the lake. And for that, they were paying $185,000 a year to Newport. Yay, good money, we thought. But that was high risk. But the leachate now is going to Montpelier, and it goes to Plattsburgh. And where it's...
Well, could you back that up just a little? What do you mean it's going to?
The leachate has to go somewhere. There's millions of gallons of leachate, millions. It is taken by trucks, big trucks, tanker trucks, to Montpelier, where it goes through their wastewater treatment system and is discharged into the Winooski River. It can't be treated for PFAS or the other permanent chemicals. They can't do that. It then winds its way down and dribbles into Lake Champlain. In Plattsburgh, which is a long haul for this leachate, it goes through their wastewater treatment and straight into the lake. So Champlain is getting as much of a bath as Memphremagog did.
Wow, I'm sorry, I'm a little speechless, because when we ride by the Montpelier facility, you can smell sometimes the worst smell in the world, and if that's what you're dealing with in Newport too, that's no way to live.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm going to let Pam really elaborate, because she really is an expert in this area. But when I went to visit some areas in Newport, you can literally, you get that smell.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
It is just horrific. And, you know, not only does your heart go out for the people who live there and have to smell it, you know, it's not just isolated. You know, it's like this permeating cloud that's going all across the city.
And I doubt you get used to it. I heard that one time.
No.
And I said, that smell is so bad, you can't possibly get used to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's harmful. An odor isn't something that just hits your nostrils. It's in the air.
It's in your skin. You absorb it.
Yeah. And when we complain about it, we're blown off. We're told, oh, somebody will come out and take a sniff. Oh, that's helpful. Well, they can't buy that because it's moved to another neighborhood. Or we're told, well, you didn't really smell it. It couldn't possibly have come to this neighborhood. Really?
Yeah, right.
Put that smell often enough to know exactly what it is.
Incredible. Do you know what bothers me? I think Montpelier and I know Burlington, they have a certain, by law, maybe Linda knows this, they have a certain number of gallons that they can release
Right.
into the waters untreated, or what, they have a permission to do that, which always bothers me.
It should
Because,
bother.
yeah, I mean,
It bothers
that
me as
shouldn't be.
well.
That shouldn't be, right? I mean, you're,
No, it should not be.
especially in Lake Champlain, kids are swimming there.
Right. I'm swimming there. I'm a swimmer.
Oh, there you go. Oh my God.
I mean, part of my rage about this is I'm an open water swimmer.
Well, and
It's-
they're forever closing Burlington beaches because of the water.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can test it one day and it's fine, but 2
Yes.
minutes later it could not be fine.
And as the climate changes, we're getting far more of the cyanobacteria blooms, way more. They
oh,
were
really?
way earlier last year than they had been previous years. If it continues as warm as this year, it'll be the end of May when we start getting blooms. And the water's
wow.
toxic then, you can't go in.
Yeah, because it's the warmth that makes
Yes.
it grow. Yeah.
Yeah, it just
Wonderful.
bounces up from the bottom.
What is the answer? I really want. What is the? How can we fix this? What would you like to see happen, both of you?
Do you want to start? I've got a lot to say.
No, I mean, we are asking for a miracle because that's, we can't just snap your
Right.
fingers overnight and fix this. But we do need to make sure that it's condensed. It's less and less and less, not enhanced. Okay, so you don't want to expand the dump. You
Yeah.
want to minimize the dump. You want to find areas where, I mean, we need a dump, but it doesn't need to be here and on the water in a tourist area where people
Right.
live and play.
Where
Okay.
the lake is an attraction.
Exactly. So you're saying, come on over, step in. It's like one of those Alfred Hitchcock movies,
Right.
come on in. And then
I dare you.
right. And so we need to figure out how do we get a business to become not only owning up for their shareholders, but they still do have a responsibility to the people.
Right.
Regardless.
I think that's the number
So
one.
there has to be a sensible sit down and there has to be heavy discussions. And I think sadly, this leak is going to open up some discussions. And, I'm the new mayor and I've already started to reach out and I'm going
Good
to
for
start
you.
having discussions. You don't want this to just continue. It's like, okay, we fixed it, move on. They got a permit, they're going to move and it's fixed. We need to address it. I'm not an activist, you know that. And I will sit down and logically and work it through, but I will address it.
Good for you. Do you know, and I'll say, Pam, one of the things I read from Dump is that the system is operational 24/7, but is staffed only 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and 2 hours on the weekend. And this leak occurred on a Saturday.
Right.
So I think there's a good place to start right there. Staff it up, people.
Well, that's
Yeah,
one.
you can't have gaps. There's no gaps. You need to rid of all the gaps.
Right.
That's one place, but the other place, there are two other main places. Casella and his tip are one thing. The other place is the manufacturers who are sticking PFAS chemicals in everything, like your dental floss. That's lubricated. Anything that requires lubrication is PFAS chemicals. Pesticides are now further contaminated with PFAS chemicals because they make them stick longer. So if you've got a dog and you're walking somewhere where they've sprayed pesticides, they'll tell you it's gone in 24 hours. That is no longer true because pesticides are now contaminated with PFAS and your dog can be poisoned for the next few weeks.
Wow.
On and on. PFAS chemicals are everywhere. They're the waterproofing in your clothes. They're the waterproofing in your shoes. It's not necessary. The manufacturers have a massive responsibility here. And instead of letting them off the hook and bringing this down to the end user, we should be targeting the manufacturers.
Linda, Pam, could you spell that for me? I'm not
Which piece?
PFAS?
Yes.
FAS. That's just
oh, I see. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to write a note, and I'm like, what is that?
It's too long a word.
Sorry.
The other place where we really have to be pushing, and this can be both as a logical person or as an activist, and frankly, I don't think the two are inseparable, is the Agency of Natural Resources and the Department of Environmental Conservation. They have abdicated responsibility for this. We have had meeting after meeting with them, and they shrug. And it's really sad because we've watched people over the years join those organizations as good environmentalists, people with lots of training, and then they get squished down to just being a permitting agency. That does not solve the problem. It is their problem to find a new landfill site. It is not ours. It is not acceptable. Right. Oh, here's this landfill site. If the airport expands, the landfill can't go up any higher. We already know that. The landfill can't expand any further out because it's all wetlands, and they cannot take any more of the wetlands and pretend that they're going to give us something else, because we know that's a lie. That's already been suggested. When they expanded a runway, that was what they were going to do, but they never mitigated it. So we're really skeptical of that one.
So what do you think is the answer to build someplace else? Away from water?
Yeah, there have to be other landfills. We cannot be the only site. 7% of the garbage that's in that landfill comes from the Northeast Kingdom. The rest of it, 93%, is coming from elsewhere. What brings the most money in is other people's hazardous waste. And that comes in from Massachusetts, from New York, from all sorts of other places. It comes chugging up our roads and straight into our landfill.
And if there's an accident on the road, right, then you've got
a big accident. We had a big leachate spill a few years ago, and 2 trucks collided on black ice. And there was no reason to send those trucks out at 3 o'clock in the morning when they knew the conditions were Vermont winter conditions. Right. That was insanity itself. But it's really dangerous. We should not be that site. We've had it for a lot of years. The treatment facility, the pilot program, which is the one that we're all talking about now, one of the suggestions has been that it should be in Montpelier, because, I like that.
Never mind, I have a tagline for that.
But frankly, I don't think it should be. I don't think it should be. And this is where I disagree with some of the dump members. I don't think it should be anywhere where the end result is going to be discharged into any body of water.
Right.
Cannot afford to sabotage any water anywhere in the world.
Well, and what kills me, you're mentioning it goes into Lake Champlain. We are inches away from the federal natural resources people coming in and taking over, fixing our Lake Champlain, and that will cost us a fortune. But we keep nibbling at it and not fixing it.
Well, then, in that area, wake up, smell the leachate.
Smell the leachate. Well, at least I know what to call it now, so there you go. So, Linda, I want to wrap this up because we only have another half hour, and I wanted to talk about the international airport and ethics. So maybe you and Pam could wrap that up and tell us what we can do. What can we do?
Yeah, so I do want to say that there is actually a joint stewardship on the environment with Canada and the United States. And I think that's really important for people to understand that our countries actually do have a history of effectively trying to work together to protect the lake and come together and make decisions. There was actually an international joint committee put together, and it was not only to regulate the height of the water, the quantity of the water, but it was also to regulate the quality of the water. And they have studies that they're doing. I know they spent over $10 million several years ago. And so there is a joint effort to figure this out. So I don't think people should think that, oh, well, Canada's not paying attention, or the United States, Newport, Canada is paying attention, and we are working together. And I think that's very important. And I think, as I said before, it's not just one person who could do this. It's not one organization. I mean, it has to be the farmers and municipalities. It has to be the two countries, the water suppliers. We all have to get together and figure it out, because just allowing, and no disregard to business, I'm pro-business, okay, really pro-business, but you have to be, you have to own up to a morality to the people that you serve. And so we have to sit down and we have to figure it out. We have to find a place that people will not be harmed. And we can't do it. One person can't do it. One organization can't do it.
I would also,
and we can't stop making noise.
I think the animals, we didn't talk about the animals, but the birds. And I worked years ago, don't yell at me, Pam, but I worked for a chemical manufacturing company. And when I would go to the plants, they'd have these open pits of treatment water, and each pit was lighter than the next because they were getting out the chemicals. But if the birds would fly too close to the whatever you call it, the spray coming up, they die. They fly over it and go plunk, and that'd be it. And I thought, good Lord. But by the time it was at the last holding tank, it was clean, so they said. And we went into the rivers down in Louisiana, and we've heard about what happens downstream from there. That was my company. But watching the birds who had no clue, just flying over and never made it to the other side, because they die. And I'm sure it just, I saw that happen, and I was trying to be a good company person, but I just was like, what, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. So you must see that up there, I would think, animals.
Well, we don't see birds flying over.
No, that was pretty dramatic, but
you have fish with leisure.
Just an occasional bird coming up from the house.
We have a kind of brown trout that has a particular kind of melanoma, and it's only in this area. And we know it's because of contamination. We can't prove where the contamination comes from, but it doesn't matter. We know it's contamination.
Right.
The state knows.
I was reading about the contamination in Lake Memphremagog. I can't even say it. Lake Memphremagog, sorry. And it's not good.
No.
It's not where it should be. So, and that's sad for visitors and tourists and the economy, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure Canada is just as worried, because they're on the other side, and whatever happens on our side happens on their side. So,
and certainly those who drink from the lake are finally getting really fired up about it, which is wonderful.
Yeah, that's good.
That's what will get our legislative bodies to do something constructive, because it's going to have to come from ANR and DEC eventually.
Yeah, you've got a good legislative group up there. They should be, they should get them to speak up.
Denial is a wonderful thing. It's not just a river.
Well, it may also be just not quite understanding to sit down and have this kind of conversation. And I did research for this show, and I was like, whoa. And I've had some, as I mentioned, some experience in the past. That's scary stuff.
Yeah.
I also think that we have our legislators, but our two legislators are in the minority party.
Right.
So they can be just so influential. They can have a seat at the table and bring up a discussion, but they're not going to have any influence on voting or making anything really happen there. It's the supermajority. It's way out of control. And when you have a supermajority who wants to just push it on rules or push it on this committee, it's not going to get done because they don't want the responsibility.
I think there's got to be a groundswell, grassroots effort, as they say, which
That's
sounds,
exactly right.
yeah,
That's
no,
where it comes from. It's where all change happens
Exactly.
initially,
I
and
agree.
then people get on board. So
Well,
that's why I say activist and legislator can come together.
there you go. Well, I wish you luck. I mean, I don't even wish you luck. I wish you success because we need to fix it. Anyway, thank you very much, Linda Sullivan, Mayor of Newport.
Thank you.
And Pam Ladds, water warrior and activist. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We will be in touch. Thank you all for listening. This is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the soundbites. Good night.